Okay, so we're going to pick up from 2 weeks ago. We started the second parak of Bava Metzia, and we see. Started the second Mishnah, I should say, not the second. We're on Chof Daled Amud Beis, the bottom of Chof Daled Amud Beis, where the Mishnah now is going to give us a listing of all those things for which you have to announce and presumably return. And again, we've had this discussion now over several weeks about the whole idea of announcing, when to announce, when not to announce. We talked about Lifnim Shiur Sadin. Jay always had the question, why not announce all the time? Again, there's halachas, and then there's uber halachas, and the halacha is what it is. And then there are times when you can be an extra chassid and be Lifnim Shiur Sadin. So the very bottom of Chof Beis Amud Beis, we'll start again the Mishnah. These circumstances.
Oh, Chof Daled, not Chof Beis.
Chof Daled Amud Beis, right? I'm sorry, you're right. Yeah, Chof Daled Amud Beis. And these are the ones that you have to announce. Says the Mishnah, Motza Peris Bekli or Kli Kamo Shehu. If someone's walking along on Arcola and Lamberton, and he sees a Kli of Paris, or just a Kli lying there, then he has to announce it. Mos Bekis, he found a purse with some money in it, or Kis Kamo Shehu, also he has to announce. Those are things that he has to, and Rashi says, Motza Paris Bekli v'stam Kli yesh bo siman. So here's the key. The key isn't, it's just not stam Kli. The Kli itself has a siman. So if the Kli has a siman, then he should announce it. And if there happens to be fruit in it, fine, then you announce the fruit too. But it's because there is a siman. Kamo shehu, says Rashi, rekon, empty. In other words, if it's just the Kli without the fruit, you still announce it. Kis, yishbo siman labalim. Again, a kis is a purse, not just like an off-the-shelf, let's say, wallet, but we're talking about some kind of a pocketbook or something that is a siman to the balim. Okay, so that's the generic Mishnah. That's what you have to do. Now, it says the Mishnah Vayter, and this becomes a little bit complicated in the Gemara. So I just want to make a point. Tzibure Peiros, Tzibure Mos, you find bundles. We don't know what a bundle is. Let's just say a bundle of Peiros or a bundle of Mos. Says Rashi, the Gemara Mefarish, Simoneha, there's two different simonim here. O minyan, O mako. When we're talking about a pile of fruits lying there, we could be talking about a number of fruits. He identifies it by saying, I lost 11 fruits piled high. Or, you know what? I left a bunch of fruit at the corner of Kersey and Arcola. So in other words, you have two different ways of looking at this particular find. One is a number, one is a place. But again, the Gemara is going to be much more detailed. We have Vayter in the Mishnah, top of Chaf Hey, Shlosha Matbeo Zeh al Gabe Zeh. Also fascinating discussion we're going to have on three matbeos, three coins, one on top of the other. And then, of course, the Gemara extrapolates why not two, why only three, but there's, again, the whole discussion on that, the Gemara Mefarish. And Karichos B'Rishus HaYachid, Karichos, these are like little bundles of wheat or something else in the Rishus HaYachid. And it's very interesting because the Farshim explained it's not really a Rishus HaYachid, it's a Rishus HaRabim that nobody uses. In other words, it becomes a Rishus HaYachid because nobody else goes there other than this person. So, so again, a discussion on that as well, that you have to announce because it's unusual. Kiko Shabalabayis, remember we had this in the very beginning of the Masechta. In other words, these are not generic loaves off the bread line, but a homemade bread, which is different for everybody. Begizei tzemer alok from a base woman, and these are specific wool that you take from the craftsman who's dyeing it, and he usually has a lot number on it. I mean, otherwise, how would you know yours from someone else? So again, there's usually a very clear siman as to what it is. All of these things you have to announce. And then finally says the Mishnah, Kade yayin v'kade shemen, those are little jugs of wine and oil. You also have to return. And then again, the Gemara is going to explain what's unusual about Kade yayin v'kade shemen. Right. So now the Gemara has given us a broad outline of the things that you have to return. Now we're going to get into the nitty-gritty of it. What is it that the Gemara is really telling us? Says the Gemara as follows. The Gemara is extrapolating now. Tama the matzah peris bekli umos bekis. The reason why you have to announce is because you found the peris in a kli. In other words, you found at our kola and kurzi, you found a bowl. The bowl has a siman on it. And you happen to find peris in it, or you found a wallet that had the letters MK, right? Nasha Katz. So, in other words, it's clear who it belongs to, and there happens to be some money in it. Hokli ulufonov peris, kis ulufonov mos are elu shalo. Here, the Gemara is extrapolating from our Mishnah that if you found a bowl that had a clear siman and there was nothing in it, but right next to it there was fruit, right? Or you found the wallet. The wallet clearly had a stamp on it. There was no money in it, but there was money next to it. So l'chayra, you would think you make the connection. The fruit goes to the bowl. The money goes to the wallet. That's the normal thought. Says the Gemara, no, you can't make that. You can't make that inference, and you have to say, says the Gemara, based on our Mishnah, that belongs to you. So that's a leap. Because normally, right? We would say it's right there. Why not announce it? Says the Gemara, no, you don't have to do it. Okay. Says Rashi, Tama the matzah hasam hu de amar shahaperis lebal hakli. There, where it's in it, you say it belongs to the bal hakli. Hakli the fun of peris. If you have a kli and in front of it is peris, ar elu haperis shel matzah. Then the peris belong to the finder. Even though the kli is to the Baal Hasimin, as a kli yakzir, there's a peris ya'akev lo, he can keep for himself, and we don't say. Now, this is not pashut. This is not a simple extrapolation of what the Gemara tells us. This should not be the case. Yet the Gemara tells us that's the way you have to learn Pshat in the Gemara, in the Mishnah, that it's not. So, okay, so fine. If that's the case, that's the case. Now, Zak the Gemara. So based on this inference, the Gemara now is going to explain a brisa to us. Tanina, this will sort of be a lesson, a learning. Tanina, the high the Tana Rabbana. So that brisa which the Rabbana learned. What was the brisa? Matzah kli ulafon of Paris. If you found a kli and in front of it was Paris, kis ulafon of Mos, hari elu shalom. Okay, this is a brisa, and the brisa is really quoting what we were saying here. That if you find a kli and in front of it is Paris, not connected to the kli, kis ulafon of Mos, Arielu Shalom. Miktsasan Bekli, this is part of that brisa. Miktsasan Bekli, if part of the fruit was in the Kli, Umiktsasan al Gabe Karka, Miktsasan Bekis, Umiktsasan al Gabe Karka, Chayev Lahachbis. However, if you find a Kli that has some fruit in it and fruit next to it, and also a kiss that has money in it and next to it. In other words, it not wholly separate, like we said in extrapolating from our brisa. So in that case, you are chayiv to return. In that case, you're chayiv to return because there, it looks like you have a chain of evidence, if you will, that something fell out of this bag, out of this kli, even though it's not fully out of the kli, some is in and some is out. We extrapolate that they all belong to one sort of parsha. They all belong together. Okay, that's the brisa. Frek the Gemara. Now, based on this understanding, the Gemara asks the kasha, V'reminu, I'll ask you the following kasha. L'chayra, there's a contradiction. Motza davar she'ein bo simin b'tzad davar she'yesh bo simin chayav l'hachas. If you find something that has a simin next to something that does not have a simin, chayav l'hachas. This is a separate brisa. Bo bal simin, if the bal simin comes, the notla shalo, and takes his zacha hala b'davar she'ein bo simin. Let's just say that that you find something lying in the street. It has a simin, and next to it there's something that doesn't have a simin, like money. And a person comes along and says, "You know what? That's my wallet," and totally ignores the money that doesn't have the simin. Says the brisa that he gets to keep the item, and the guy who announces it gets to keep the money. L'chayra, that's a stira. Why should he get to keep it? It's clear that it's part of what was lost. So why does he get to keep it without announcing it? He should at least announce it.
But once the other guy, the guy came along, I came along and I said, the guy's finding this wallet, some money in it, some money next to it. I come running back because, oh, oops, I left my wallet in the marketplace. Oh, there it is. I pick it up. I look and I see, oh, there's about $60 in there. And yeah, I think that's what I had. So this other $50 next to it, I don't think that's mine. I'm going to leave it. If I'm an honest person, I'm going to leave the other part and walk away with my wallet. So this other guy here who was about to do the mitzvahs of a Shabbos Aveda, he's now the situation has changed.
The kasha here is on the one who has found it. Must he announce or not?
Right, but now that the wallet has been taken away by the person who claims to be the owner,
right?
So now we've changed the reality on the ground. Because the whole reason why the $50 next to it needed to be announced was because it was considered combined with the 60 in the wallet and the wallet itself. If that 50 is by itself, there's no need to announce it.
You're correct after the fact, but how about before the fact? Before the fact, why should he not announce, I found a wallet and $50? According to this, he should have to announce it. Yet we have a brisa that says that if there is money that's not connected to the item, he doesn't even have to announce it. So we have a stira here as to whether or not he even had to announce that money, which was unconnected to the wallet. That's the Gemara's kasha. Gemara's kasha here is, you see in one brisa, you don't have to announce, and yet in another brisa, you do have to announce. Now, if you're lucky enough, he doesn't take the money, it's yours, but you have to announce. And in the other brisa, you never had to announce.
But why do I have to announce? If I announced before the guy came along and claimed the wallet, then I'm following the other one saying you have to announce. And if he came along before I had a chance to announce it, I've now got a different reality. I'm confused.
Right. No. So the point is that this brisa is making the pronouncement that you have to announce. The brisa is saying you must announce. The previous brisa says you don't even have to announce. Comes along this brisa and says you do have to announce. That's the kash. It's a stira on the two brises in circumstances that are virtually similar. One brisa says you have to announce, and if the guy doesn't take it, you're lucky enough it's your money. And in the other case, the brisa says you don't even have to announce it because it's not connected to the item. So it's either one way or the other. Either you announce it and see what happens, or you don't announce it. Why in one case of similar facts, you're announcing, and another case you're not announcing? That's the Gemara's. That's what's puzzling the Gemara is here. Is you're telling me that we're going to make all these extrapolations of when you do have to announce and when you don't have to announce. Okay, fine. Let's be uniform. But l'chayra, according to this, it's a steer of the prices. We're not being uniform. We're not saying that in each case you have to do the same thing. That's what's troubling the Gemara. Is that why not do the same thing each time? Either announce it or don't announce it. So in this particular price, you have to announce it, and either the guy takes the money or doesn't. And in the other case, where the money was lying next door, right next to it, you don't even have to announce it, because you're saying it's wholly separate from that kli, which was 6 inches away. That's what's puzzling the Gemara. So let's look at Rashi. Okay, so that was previously Mitzasam B'Kli Hadavar Mochiach the Hanach the Al Gabi Karka the Hanach it's V'chayev L'Hachrisa because it's part of it, right? The Mi Sheyitn Simin B'Kli V'chein Mos L'Bal Kis. In other words, if it's partially in and partially out, and the guy says, "Oh yeah, there was 3/4 lying in the thing, and then you have another quarter lying outside," the that you can connect. Could go most lifnei kis chayiv lahachris al hakol v'yitnu hamos l'bal kis. So now says Rashi, bo bal simin v'not l'shalo es hakis v'alma ein hamor shali. So here you have a guy who says, "Oh my gosh, that's my wallet. Money, that's not my money." So then what happens? Zacha halo b'mos. So this fellow is zacha in the money. He's zacha in the money, but he had to have announced it. And yet in the previous brisa, we said that he didn't even have to announce it if it was lying next to it. That's the Gemara's kasha here. Okay. So
actually, a question here, and I'm just, as you can tell, I'm getting confused.
It's complicated. It's a complicated.
It's one of these brises saying a situation. The Mishnah the first case we had was you had money in the wallet and money outside the wallet next to it. Are we saying here a different case, a slightly different case, where there's no money in the wallet and but there is money next to it?
Correct.
Ah, that's the difference. Okay.
Correct. So where there is money in and out, we extrapolate that the money out is part of the money in. Where there is money only out and not in, then so one brisa says you don't have to announce it all because there's no connection. The other brisa says that you announce it, and if the guy comes and takes his wallet and leaves the money, it's yours. If not, I mean, then you can keep it. Otherwise, he gets it. So that's the stira in brises.
Okay. So the stira really is not so much on what you do if the guy takes the wallet, claims the wallet. It's whether it was had to announce in the first place if there was no money actually in the wallet, only next to it. Okay.
Correct.
Now it's making a little more sense.
Correct. That's exactly right.
Excuse me, Rabbi.
Yeah.
When you if somebody has a wallet and it drops and money starts to fall out, the money that's left is not going to be neatly stacked up and stuff falls out nice and neatly on a pile. There's going to be something that shows that things are falling out of the wallet, much more likely than saying there's no evidence that something came from the wallet.
Which is why we say in that kind of circumstance, we certainly connect the dots and say that there was money in the wallet, as some rolled out, therefore they have to be together. You can't say, oh, the money outside the wallet had nothing to do with the money inside the wallet.
I'm saying that
Exactly for the reason that you're saying.
the reason, yeah, exactly, because it's impossible to have.
Can't be
Money
neatly
slipping.
stacked in one and then rolling it on the other. It's that he dropped the wallet, and while he dropped the wallet, some of the money rolled out.
It started to slip out, all the money, but some of it made it out and some didn't.
That's when we can say that it belongs to him, right?
Yeah.
All right, so that's the steer we have right now. So now the Gemara, interestingly here, is going to give a number of different terutzim to this stira, and this is what really is interesting. Amar Rav Zvid, comes Rav Zvid, loy kasha. There's no stira between the two cases, the two brises. Why? Ha b'kuva of hinta. One brisa is speaking where there is sort of a flax or some kind of a material that is in the wallet or whatever it was that he was holding, right? Okay. Ha bitsina uperi. The other brisa is speaking about a bowl, like a smooth bowl and payers. So what's the terrace? So in other words, he's coming to say that it's not a stira in the two brises. It's not a conflict. The brisa that tells us that the finder can keep that which is next to the let's say the wallet. Okay, you're talking about an item where there flax is presumably the way he describes it. It's a sticky substance. So if you find let's say this basket, this barrel, and it has some substance in it, clearly it's going to belong to the item, because you can't get rid of it. In other words, where you have to announce, because it's not clear, is where there's a basket and then there's fruit, and it's easy enough to say that all the fruit rolled out of that basket, because fruit it's round, it's not sticky, so everything that came out came out. So there you can say that there's no issue, and the fellow has to return everything to the owner of the basket. In other words, the owner of the basket comes and says, you know what, this is my basket, here's the simon, but all that fruit is mine. So the kasha is, what do you mean? How do I know it's your fruit? Terrence, it's my fruit because it's logical that the fruit rolled right out of the basket. It's smooth. Okay, says the bride. So you know what? I agree. In that particular case, he has a taina that it belongs to him. But where you're talking about like a sticky substance like flax, and the sticky substance, it rolled out, but you have a couple of pieces that they will automatically stick inside. There, he can't taina, the finder can't taina, it's not yours, because you see inherently that the flax is stuck to the inside of the item. So there's no way for him to separate it out. Says Rav Zvid, the one brisa that says that he has to announce it and it automatically has to return it is talking about where it's easy enough to say that everything came out, and therefore we're being more serious, more difficult on the finder of a substance where you can't argue that, oh no, it doesn't belong to it. Sure, it belongs to it. It rolled right out of the basket. But where you have something that does stick to the inside, there it's much easier to say, no, it belongs to the finder, because you can see that he lost what he lost. So take a look at Rashi. Rashi explains, when we say it belongs to the finder, it's b'chuba b'chinta, right? Gigis muteles upishton lefaneha, like the basket is there and the pishton is in front of it. The vadai hai pishton lav mekuba nafel. It clearly couldn't have fallen from this place. The imine nafel have mishtayer bo. In other words, here you have a basket, and in front of it you have flax. So you're going to say, oh, wait a minute, that flax belongs to the basket. Says Rashi, of course not. Because if it belonged to the basket, some of the flax would have gotten stuck in the basket. It's not smooth enough that it rolls out 100%. The minei nafel have a mishtayerba, who hadin the kiss, the fun of Mos, and the same with the kiss and the money, it wouldn't have completely rolled out. Mahaitan, l'hodik tani chayiv, and that what we say that he has to return. B'tzina uperi de avida de sharke v'nafli b'nei kula. By a case of a bowl and fruit, if the bowl gets turned over, there's no sticky fruit. It's apples, it's oranges, it's whatever. It all rolls away. There you can't oh, it doesn't belong to that basket. Of course it belongs to the basket, because logic tells you that when the fruit rolls out, it rolls out entirely. In the case of flax, if there's any flax left over, you'll see it. If the flax is outside, you don't have to return it. The shaila is, why in one case do you return, in one case you don't return? The Teretz says, in the case of the flax, if the flax is completely outside, you don't return because it's impossible to belong to that basket. Why? Because if it really was part of that basket, it would have been sticky pieces of flax still stuck in the basket, and we're finding an empty basket. But in the case of the fruit, it's a very easy thing to say, wait a minute, the fruit all belonged to that bowl, because when the bowl turned over, it was apples, it was oranges, it was round fruit that just rolled away. So therefore, Rav Zin wants to give a teretz. That's the chilik between the two brises. Why in one brisa you don't return it at all? Because it can't belong to it. Because if it had belonged to it, it would have been stuck. And in one case, you do have to return it because logic tells you that it's automatically part of what you lost.
All right, to take a little bit of an extreme example, contrived example, but we're good at contrived examples here. You find the block from the bank, you find a bag that has some money in it and a packet of dye, which has exploded all over the money. And next to the bag, you find some other money that's totally clean.
Okay.
So on the one hand, there's money in both. On the other hand, this is a situation where presumably what happened is the robber had the bag, had money in it, opened it up when he was a block away. The dye exploded all over. He dropped the bag and ran. There's other money next to it. It has no dye on it. Presumably that's not connected, or else, it would, if it had fallen out of that bag, it would have been.
There would have been some tracks, some simon,
yeah.
Right. So yes. So inherently, Rav Zvid wants to make a chilik between an item that you can argue the whole thing comes from that basket. There's no reason to say it doesn't come from that basket because it easily rolled out, versus it can't belong to that basket, because if it belonged to that basket, there would have been some sticky stuff still in the basket. So that's why Rav Zvi says in one case the finder automatically gets to keep it, because there's no way that it's attached to that item. But in the other case, he doesn't get to keep it because it's easy to argue that fruit all belongs to that bowl because it's an easy roll, as they say. It easily rolled out. There's no way you can argue, oh, one pear would have stuck or one peach would have stayed. No, it capsized, everything rolls out. But by the flax, if the flax is sitting in front of it, you can't say, oh, that flax belongs to that basket. How do you come to say that? Because if it comes to that, assuming 99% of it rolled out, there would have been some flax still in the basket, and there isn't. That's what Rav Zvid is coming to tell us. We're talking about a kind of a substance that if it really truly rolled out of that basket, there would have been something left. That's Rav Zvid's pshat in to answer the stira. Okay, very good answer, nice answer. And so comes Rav Papa, and he says, no, I have a different answer. I'm not going to go that direction. Rav Papa Omar, both cases are speaking about a bowl and fruit where it's easy for the whole thing to just roll out. If that's the case, that it's easy to roll out, why in one case do you have to return it, in one case not? That doesn't make sense. So he says, for lo kasha, hod hishtayr bo midi, hod lo hishtayr bo midi. So he says no. He gives a more direct answer and says that the reason why in one case you return it because there was some fruit left, and one case not. In other words, he doesn't want to go the direction of two different types of bowls. He says it was all one type of item, but the chilik is there anything left in the bowl that can connect the fruit to the bowl? If there's nothing left in the bowl, then you could say, fine, has nothing to do with it. So Rav Papa's is really more of a straightforward answer, where he's not looking to sort of cut corners and say, we're talking about this item or that item. So according to him, where in the Brisa, where it says that he can keep it, is that there was nothing at all remaining in the basket. And that's a fairly straightforward, simple answer. Now, what's behind that answer? So let's take a look at Rashi. Rashi is going to explain Rav Papa's thinking. When the Brisa says you have to return it, b'dishtayer, okay, we'll see what that means in a minute. V'hod the lowish tire, given the stam sina yeshloi ukigin kefulin the toko. A basket usually has a folded edge. In other words, the basket just doesn't come to an edge. It's usually woven and sort of doubled back, so you have a little bit of a lip. But given the stam sina yeshloi ogzin kefulin, it's doubled over. Imi toko nafel u'mishtaya be the ogin ma'akrele. Comes with Papa and says, you know what? A basket has a lip. So if you see something stuck in that lip, let's say it was kernels of rice, corn, or whatever you want to call it, and it rolled out, it all rolled out. So he's saying if everything rolled out, he can keep it because it's not connected to that basket. But if you see a couple of items stuck in that lip, then you have to announce, because there it becomes clear that that's part of what was in it. So again, to understand the stira in the Brisa, why in one case does he not have to announce, in one case he does, says Rav Papa, we're talking about a circumstance where the basket itself was created in such a way that it had a lip, and if there was nothing in the basket, then you could say it has no shaykhs to the basket. It just is a basket, and then there's fruit. One has nothing to do with the other. You don't have to announce it. But where there is like a little bit of a piece of fruit or something that's stuck in the lip, that you have to announce, because they're already. That's like the case of mikzasim b'fnin, mikzasim b'chutz, which we had before, where part is in, part is out. If part is in and part is out, then you have a trail, and you can't get away from it. So here, where you have that little lip, then he says that's already a siman that it belongs to that item, and you have to announce it. So he wants to, that's his pshat, that's for Papa's pshat as to the philek between, you don't have to go between two different types of baskets, all one type of basket. But the question is, what's in the basket? Is it completely clean? In which case you don't have to announce the fruit because there's no connection between the fruit and the basket. If there's something stuck in it, then you have to announce because there's at least the possibility that it belongs there.
Rabbi, I think it's probably worth recalling
Yeah, David.
because of all the complications that the Torah as written really creates only a binary situation. You find something lost from somebody else, you either return it if you know who it is and where the person is, or you keep it in your house. And that sounds like there's no limit to it. So it was left to the Torah Shebaal Peh to prescribe a way of finding out who the person is if you don't know, which is lahachriz, or determining in these cases of where there was likely that anybody ever was going to come around looking for it, and whether you were obligated to return it or not, in such a way that they would meet the requirement of the Torah to get things. Obviously, the bias of the Torah was toward getting things back to the rightful owner, but the all of these discussions and ramifications are really to determine if there is a practical way of finding a rightful owner. So this is all to fill in the gap that left between the two Torah Shebeksav possibilities of either you return it when you know it, or you keep it in your house.
Absolutely, and that's the whole shakla b'tari of the Gemara, of the Torah Shebaal Peh, if you want to call it, is to try to bridge what we're doing is we're bridging the black and the white, like you say. We've got a black and we're white, and we don't know, there's no in between. Says the Gemara here, we're going to find ways to bridge the black and the white. Either we're going to, like the Zvid says, okay, you know what? This is the circumstance. Here we're going to find a way to bridge the yes or the no, the return or the not. Comes to Papa and finds, no, I have a more straightforward way. You're right. That's what the Torah Shebaal Peh is doing. It's giving us the opportunity to bridge the contrast between return or not return by finding ways that we can hang our hat and say, you know what? This is a way of returning it. This is a siman of a way of returning it. Or no, this is a way of a siman of returning it. So you're right. That's what the whole Gemara is trying to do here, is trying to get us to a point where we can be more definitive in saying, is this Hashavas Haveda? Do we have to return this? Or no, it belongs to the person. He doesn't even have to announce, right? Fine. Comes the Gemara weiter and says, "V'i boyis ema." Okay, I have another shot. If you want to say, "Ha v'ha delo shtayr bei midi," no, in neither case do you have to say there was anything that was in the basket. The basket was completely empty. Remember, the Papa now wants to say there was a little bit of a lip. Some was in, some was not. No, then why in one case do you return one not? Now, you talk about random. The Gemara is saying in one case, the mouth of the basket was facing the peiros, and the other case, the mouth of the basket was not facing the peiros. Now, is that random or not? If you have a basket, it fell and it had fruit, and the fruit fell out, and it's all in front of the opening, then you could say, you know what? It belongs to that basket. But if, let's say you had a basket and the opening was facing north and the fruit was facing northwest or southeast, then you're going to say, you know what? One has nothing to do with the other. Because if it truly came from that basket, it should have rolled out from the mouth of the basket. I mean, this, to me, this is as random as you can get when you think about a teretz, is because the whole teretz is now based on the fact of whether or not that fruit, you can draw a line from the fruit to the opening and say, Mistamit belongs to that basket because it rolled right out. So that's what the boy is saying. Lokasha, okay. So the boy is saying, so that's the Iboyus Ema that he wants to say that it's no, has no raya, has nothing to do with whether or not there was any food left on the lip of the kli. Forget about it. No lip of the kli. All have to do with the direction in which the fruit was lying. Says Rashi. Okay, so there's no Rashi here. So Rashi says there's no Rashi here. So the Gemara pretty straightforward. Says the Gemara, wait a minute. We have one more boys. We have another alternative that we can look at. What is that alternative? Says the Gemara, the e-boy is Ema. No, both cases are speaking where the mouth of the basket was facing the pavus. In other words, if it rolled straight out. In that case, why does one brisa say you get to keep it, and one brisa says you do not get to keep it? And for the Gemara, it was below kasha hod islay ognin litzina or the lesne ognin litzina. So the Gemara gives a different terrace here. That why one case you get to keep, why you don't get to keep. So he incorporates that's what he said right before, is because in one case it had a rim, in one case it didn't have a rim. So the Gemara is employing different terutzim and combining them. First it said it had a rim or didn't have a rim. Okay, good. Then they said forget about the rim. It had to do with direction of the mouth of the basket. This Aboyas Ema is coming to say, you know what? We're going to combine both of them. Really, the entire fruit was facing the mouth of the rim. Why does one get to keep or not? The mouth of the basket. Why does one get to keep or not? The brisa that says you get to keep the produce is where it had a rim and there was nothing in the basket, so you could say doesn't belong there, right? But there's the other brisa which says you don't get to keep it. It refers to a case where there is no rim, and if there's no rim, then you can't argue. Oh, wait a minute! It clearly doesn't belong to that basket. Of course, it belongs to that basket. The entire fruit rolled out. Remember, the Gemara is making us think here. What are the reasons why a person would have to return an item or not? So it goes first by saying, you know what? It's because it has a rim, it doesn't have a rim. The opening faces in one direction, the opening faces not in one direction. So it's a fine line, but it's trying to make a chilek of where you have to return the item and where you don't have to return the item. So what the Gemara is doing here, it's coming full circle, and it's giving us a teretz for even for the final teretz. It's giving us a teretz that it's combining the two. All right. So what have we learned from this Gemara? Basically, what we've learned from this Gemara is that the Gemara is telling us, here's the circumstance. You find an item, you find a kli, and you find something next to a kli. When do you return it? When do you not return it? When do you say it belongs to part of the kli? And when do you say it does not belong to part of the kli? So the Gemara just goes through a series of different terutzim. Again, some of them are more strained than others, but it goes through a series of terutzim of telling us this is the siman, this is the way you would say it's likely that it belongs to that kli, and therefore you have to announce it or not. Again, we're not talking the flim l'shur sadin. We're not talking about if someone wants to be a good Samaritan. We're talking about what's my achrayus. When do I have to announce it? When don't I have to announce it? So the Gemara went through a number of different terutzim and is trying to make us understand when you have to announce it and when you don't have to announce it. So now in the last part, let's look at Rashi. It couldn't have fallen, even a nafel of a mishtayr be midi. Again, the Gemara is extrapolating, it couldn't have fallen from this basket because if it would have, a kernel or something would have been stuck. So again, if you take that position that something would have been stuck and therefore it belongs, you have to announce it, fine, you have to announce it. But where it doesn't have a rim at all, then you can't make the argument that it belongs to that basket because there's no way of connecting the two. All right, so that's the Gemara Shakla V'Tarya on this question. Now let's just complete the next part of the Mishnah, which is this is a very interesting circular thinking in terms of the Gemara. We talk about David, the Torah Shabbat Peh, trying to make us understand what the halacha is. This is a twister. The Mishnah says, if you said the second part of the Mishnah says, Tzibure Peiros, Tzibure Mos. If you find sort of a pile of Peiros or a pile of money, and Rashi tells us that the Gemara is telling us there's two different possible simonim, either the account or a place. Either I lost 10 apples piled one on top of the other, or I lost them at a particular place. We don't know which one, but that's what the Gemara is going to try to explain. Says the Gemara like this. Tzibure payers with tzibure mos. If you have piles of payers and piles of money, says the Gemara, shamit minei minyan. Right? That l'chayra, what we're learning from here, that minyan have a siman. Shamit minei minyan have a siman. We're learning from here that the number of the items that you find, that's the siman. So when a person comes and says, I found a whole batch of fruit. And the guy says, oh, that was my fruit. There were 10 lemons piled one on top of the other. Oh, really? Okay, that's a siman. You find 10 lemons piled one on top of the other, that's a good siman. So the Gemara says, l'chayra, that's what we're learning from here. Right? That it has to do with you treating the number of items. Correct the Gemara. If that's the case, Tanit Tzibur Peiros. Why are you telling me that it has to do with the number of the items that he found, and that's the siman? Maybe we're talking about different circumstance entirely. Not that he found 10 lemons. Rather, if it's for instance, a single pile of something. In other words, he had a lot of fruit, but a single pile of the fruit, that's the siman. It's not the place, it's not the count, the number, but rather the specific way it was set up. So either if you're going to say minyan have a simon, that you know what, I lost a dozen fruit. It just so happens that at the corner of our kola and kurzi, there was a dozen fruit sitting there. Then l'chayra, that would have been the simon. The simon is that he identified the number of fruit. Comes the Gemara. Why is that? Why is that the condition? It's not the number of fruit. It's the way the fruit were set up.
Oh, excuse me, Rabbi.
Rabbi, yeah,
You have three variables here. You
Two
can-
variables.
There's,
Minyan,
there's location is one.
right,
Number two is the way it's shaped or piled.
right.
Number three is either the count or specifically what it was. So how many of these 3 or 4 different possibilities do you have to end up with a conclusion that we know that we make a judgment based on, because you can't base it on any one of them. You have to have at least 2, I would suspect, or maybe 3. And that's why I'm a little confused with whether the Gemara is saying any one of these variables is good enough to therefore make a decision on whether announce or not announce.
Well, Jay, you're right on the mark, because what you're asking is, what is the Gemara trying to tell us? And the Gemara itself is confusing in what it is telling us. That's the point I wanted to make, is that this is a very, very complicated little piece of Gemara, because we would expect the Gemara to give us a definitive answer on whether it is number or place. The Gemara goes back and forth and conflicts and says, you know what? We must be talking about numbers, because that's what it means. You found a dozen of an item. In fact, the Gemara, what do you mean? From the language of that Mishnah, you can't tell it's talking about numbers. Maybe it's talking about
Location.
not numbers, but a specific form of the number. Not a dozen items, but
The
a
placement.
dozen or piled in a certain way or identified in a certain way. So the Gemara is saying inherently, I can't answer you. I can't tell you what the right answer is as to how to figure it out, as to whether or not it is one or the other. So that's the Gemara's kasha. The Gemara started by saying Tzibur payers shamit minay. We learn from here minyan havasimin, that the number of the items, a dozen of the fruit, that's the simon.
so Rabbi, let's say that you're walking, you said, hey, there's a dozen apples, and they're sitting over there on the corner of Lamberton and Arcola. And I left them there. And then you come back and there's only 11 because somebody walked by and picked up one of them. Does that immediately take away your claim?
Well, that's a good kasha, because whether or not, if your simon was that there was 12 items there and there's now only 11, then the chayra, that's a problem. But we're talking maybe in real time where that's not a kasha. You're right that if the identifying mark was the number and you came back and said, oh, I lost a dozen and there's only 11 or 10 there, that could be a problem for his simon. That could be a problem for a simon. But the Gemara is not even saying that. The Gemara is saying, you want to tell me that the simon here is the number. How do you know? How do you know it has anything to do with the number? Maybe it has to do with the form. The Gemara is asking of itself, how do I know I'm right? How do I know that I should follow numbers? Maybe I should follow not numbers, but a format, that they were piled in a certain way, in a ring or on top of each other. So yours is a good point, Stuart, but it's not. In other words, that could be a separate kasha. What you're saying could be a separate kasha. What we're talking here is, what is it? Is it numbers or is it a form? So the Gemara starts off. Go ahead.
Rabbi, can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I can't understand something. I know sometimes you try to count coins, so you pile them up in 25 to a stack. If you've lost it, why would it be stacked up? you're walking in the field, you have to, if you see 25 coins lying on the floor, why is that different than the stacked up sitting on this, on the road? I mean, first of all, who's gonna stack up coins on a road and lose them? It's more likely that it's gonna be, just everywhere. It'll be dropped.
Sometimes fruit is packaged in sort of cellophane, it's all sealed up. Like
Right.
a big box of grapes. They don't.
Yeah, but that's current. They didn't do that years ago. They didn't have cellophane.
For sure.
So
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
why are they, they're applying this on something that, it's made like a pyramid. Well, if somebody took the time to put the fruit, like he's stacking it up as if he's gonna sell it, then I'm sure he's gonna realize that he's left it, unless something happened that he's gotta run away and, the bandit comes, the robbers, he ran away, then it's stolen.
Or David, he's holding it, he's got it in a wheelbarrow or something, and he doesn't realize that it's falling off piecemeal. In other words, he's not even aware that he's losing it because it's just falling off his wagon. So
That too.
you can argue he did it intentionally, or you can argue, of course, he didn't do it intentionally. It just kept slipping one after the other. And now someone comes and says, I found fruit. And the guy says, you know what? I've been losing fruit all along as I've been walking from point A to point B. So if he can say, you know what, it was a dozen fruit, okay, he's given a simon. Says the Gemara, wait a minute, why it should have nothing to do with numbers. It should have to do with the way it fell, where he comes and identifies and says, you know what, that fruit was in a pile, like an L or whatever. Not that it was just haphazard. So the Gemara, those are the, so that's what the Gemara is asking on himself. What's the right way? What is the right way of identifying loose fruit? Is it by saying numbers, or is it by saying, no, it's a simon. I piled it a certain way, therefore it's mine. That's the Gemara's kasha.
He could
If it's
also say
piled up,
that,
it's not lost.
say that if he dropped it, it should be in a line.
That's right.
The trail is the shape.
The trail is the shape, and that should be the simon.
That
Well,
would-
not necessarily.
But that's what the Gemara is asking. Which is the right way to look at it? Is it sheer numbers, or is it the trail, as you put it? In other words, the format. That's the Gemara's kasha. And this is the Gemara is deliberating in itself, trying to understand what is the right way of looking at it. So let's just try to complete. Okay. So Shavet B'nai have a siman, Tanit Sibur Perish, Shamit B'nai Makoim. So then it has nothing to do with the numbers, right? It should be the location of where the item was lost. In other words, it has nothing to do with the fact that he lost a dozen fruit. It has to do with the fact that he lost them at Arcola and Kersey. So now we're talking about Mokim, not Minyan. We're not talking about numbers. We're talking about Mokim. Says the Gemara, maybe that's the way we have to learn. That Mokim have a sin. Forget about the fact that it was numbers. Numbers is fungible, like Scott said. Maybe somebody came along and picked up an apple. So the relative number should not be important. What should be important is it happened at Arcola and Kersey, because when this guy is announcing and saying, I found fruit. So now people are going to come out of the woodwork and say, oh, I lost fruit. Well, how many did you lose? I lost a dozen. Okay, where'd you lose them? I lost them at Bybee. Okay, in other words, so how do you know it's numbers? You don't know. Maybe it's place. You have to say, I lost it at Arcola and Kersey. And then it becomes irrelevant whether it's 11 pieces of fruit or 12 pieces of fruit, because at that point, you're right, someone could have taken one of the pieces of fruit, but at least he's identified location.
Well, an animal could have taken it. An
Say?
animal could pick up a piece of food.
Say it
Or for
again?
that matter, if he's riding a horse and he's going down Lamberton, and as he's riding down, coins are falling out of his little bag.
Bag, right.
You may not find some.
And he may not even have known it, right?
So you can't go by number, and you really can't go by location, because if you start out on a cola and you end up down 5 blocks down, what's the chances of finding it? You might find 1 or 2, but you still found 2 coins. So if you tell me and I lost 20 of them, I'm going to say, listen, I lost 20, but you only found 2. Well, that might not mean it's not mine. It still could be mine. And where are the other 18? Unless, you started at Arcola and walked down and searched the whole thing on your way down.
Right. Right. So that's what makes it complicated. Says the Gemara, no, I'm going to reject that too. You can't tell me it has to do with Mokum. Tane Tzibura Peiris. The Lashon of the Mishnah is a pile of Peiris. It has to do with piles, not location. What the Gemara is doing is going back and forth and using one language against the other language. It says Tzibura Peiris, piles of Peiris. Piles of Peiris can be a location or it can be a number. The Gemara has just, I'll use the term imploded, but the Gemara has undermined itself by saying, no matter what you say, I'm going to argue the other side of it. You're going to want to tell me it has to do with piles, and I'm going to tell you it has to do with numbers. Okay, you're going to want to come and tell me it has to do with place, a Mokum, and I'll tell you, it has nothing to do with Mokum. It has to do with piles. So again, what makes this complicated is at the end of this little piece of Gemara, we don't know what the right way of approaching this is. Is it really numbers or is it place?
This must be on, Rabbi, this must be on the final exam for anybody to get smicha, to go through the whole Gemara and explain it.
That you have to, exactly, that you have to explain each side and say, if you hold like this, then this is a kasha, all right? So let's hold like this.
Yeah,
But then that's a kasha.
you need a
And that's
flow, you need a
that's
flow
exactly what the
diagram.
Gemara,
You need a flow
what's
diagram
that?
of this Gemara.
Yeah. All right, so basically, what have we concluded? We have not concluded anything on this particular piece of Gemara. We don't know whether Mokim, whether place is what is the key location, or whether it has to do with the way it was laid out. And you can argue either way, and the Gemara argues both ways, and therefore does not come to a conclusion. So Lamaisa, let's just talk Lamaisa a minute. If a person lost an item at Arcola and Kersey, and it happened to have an unusual shape in the way it was lost, and he is, you know what, this is mine. I can't tell you how many there were, but it had this particular shape. So the chayra, that should be a good simon. It should be a good simon because he's identifying the way the person found it. The person found it that way, and it's not the norm. It's not just like I dropped 1, I dropped 2, I dropped 3. But yet you can still argue the other way around, that if a person lost items, David, like you said, a person lost items and he doesn't know what he lost, but he knows he lost it at the corner of Arcola and Kersey. He can say, I don't know if it was 11 or 12 or 10, but at the corner of Arcola and Kersey, there should be a pile of fruit that I lost. So l'chayra, that should be a good simon. That's what the Gemara is grappling with. And at the end, the Gemara does not give us a teretz to say one is better than the other. So l'chayra, it looks like, I'll say, that either one of them should be a valid way of identifying a simon. right? And that's what the Rashi in the Mishnah, and Rashi, what does Rashi tell us? Rashi said, the Gemara Mefarish Simone, O minion, O mokum. Rashi tells us that the Gemara is going to swing both ways. It's going to go either minion, numbers, or place. And the Gemara doesn't define one better than the other. So what we're left with is l'chayra. There's two different ways of defining a siman. If you find a pile of fruit or a pile of money, and it's either going to be with minion or it's going to be with mokim, and neither of them are better than each other. So that's how that Gemara ends. So that's the pshat in this Gemara. So, all right, so we'll finish this Mitzvah Shem, and next week we're going to go to the next category, which has to do with Shlosha Medbeis, which is, if you think this is fascinating, wait till you go to next week, because now we're going to be talking about if a person lost 3 coins, just to give you a heads up, are they 3 kings or leaders, rulers used to mint coins. So sometimes they minted different size coins, or sometimes they minted the same size coin. So this whole Gemara will have to do with if you find coins, depending on the size of the coins and how you found them, whether or not it's a simon. It's really quite an unusual Gemara. So Mitzvah next week we'll pick up from Hey and Aleph on the Inyan of Shlosha Madeus.
Yeah, sure.
All right. So this was enough of a tongue twister. Next week, Mitzvah we're going to go even further.
Thank you.
All right. Zag gesund, everybody. Have a good week.
Thank you.
All right. Yes, yeah.